Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting for April 3rd. And first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that this is the month of April is the month for cancer and the daffodils. And I brought my own fresh ones in as opposed to the plastic ones. So to encourage people to donate to the Cancer Society. Holding this meeting today on the Coast Salish territory. And I would look to the committee for approval of the agenda. So moved. Is there a seconder? Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Carried. Looking for an adoption of the minutes from March 20th. Moved. Second. Any questions? Seeing none. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Is there any business arising from the minutes?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We'll move straight into the public input period. So is there anybody here that wishes some public input to provide the public with an opportunity to comment on anything on the agenda? Welcome. Step up to the podium there and turn on the microphone.
Hello. Did I do that right?
You did. You turned on the microphone. You're doing good.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you very much for hearing this. Madam Chairperson, I suppose I call you that?
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. I'm here to speak about the situation between Timber West and the CVRD rezoning a parcel of land up by Honeymoon Bay. I represent Missachi Lake, the community of Missachi Lake. We are in a dire situation down there. We've got a sewer system that is in failure, and we are not anywhere near complying with the Clean Water Act. So Timber West has offered us a piece of land so that we can build a sewer treatment system on that. CVRD has been good enough to hunt down a grant for us so that the financing will be approved or be available. The community of Missachi Lake has stepped up and made a large commitment. 48 houses are going to be financing. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a lot of money, and it'll be added to our taxes for about 20 years. So we're all in financially. We're in as much as we can be. What we need to have happen is we need to have this project finished by May of 2020. The project has to be finished because the grant will be gone. And if we don't finish, we end up with a pipe that goes to no place that we'll have to pay for. Now, we've already been committed to pay for the engineering to get us to this point. Now, that had to be done because when the boots hit the ground, you got to know where you're going to be going. So the engineering is done. What we need to have is we need to have a commitment from CVRD that they will zone that property. We need a commitment from Timber West. Please give CVRD that piece of property and let us go forward. If you don't do this, we're stuck in the middle. We have no power. All we have is our voice. And we've got a flushing system that's going to stop working. And I'm going to blame somebody for that. It's going to be really bad. So we really, it behooves you now to stop talking about this system and to get this system going. It's really important. Hopefully that's all I need to tell you. I think you can understand if you can't flush your toilet, you got to move. Yeah. Oh, no, you can't move because you can't flush your toilet. Okay, I'll leave you with that.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll see you on the 24th. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Seeing nobody else at the podium, I'd like to, oh, here's, yep, come on.
Come up here.
Yep,
Hi.
that helps.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thanks, everybody. Sarah here from Area EAPC, and I just want to make a quick statement about the changes to the development permit variance process. As a group, we had some questions about what that would entail. The memorandum that was sent out didn't have a detailed list of, you know, the impacts that that would make to an APC, and so we were looking for clarity there. And also, in sort of trying to understand the process, I read, especially in the ALC documentation, that that the application may be, or the local government could refer, when necessary, to the APC or an AAC, an Agriculture Advisory Committee, and then also hold a public meeting for an application when necessary. And so for me, it was the when necessary that really stood out, and if some way there could be clarity on that issue, we could perhaps help to clarify it all around. Not that the APC wants to see every single variance application. No, that's not what we're interested in. But we also do feel that we play a vital role representing the community, and when it is necessary, we would like to be able to participate. So I think defining the when necessary part would help the community feel a lot more comfortable in loosening the reins at any time. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Is there anyone else?
Yes. Hello, my name is Susan Ford.
You can just bend it down towards, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, my name is Susan Ford, and I'm speaking to the variance permit filed by Jackson Liedenfrost at 1905 Wooden Road. I'm against Jackson Liedenfrost being granted a variance to this property for these reasons. The letter I received from the CVRD says that due to a siting error, the subject property has been located within the required setback. This is incorrect. This property has not been located within the required setback distance. There is also a road setback that he has not taken into account from his property to Wooden Road and then to my property for a total of 30 feet. This is an extremely large violation. I would have thought he would be fully aware of these legal requirements as he works in the construction trade and runs an online property development business with a partner. It was his responsibility to make himself fully aware of where he can legally build his house on his property. You can't blame this egregious error he made on a wrong survey. I made the realtor aware of my property line months ago, and when I pointed this out to Mr. Liedenfrost, where my property line was, and that there was a dedicated public road slated for future development between my property and his, which increased the legal setback for him, he still chose to pour his house foundation in violation of the setback distances. It became apparent to me that he was taking over the road dedication. I could no longer walk on the public path beside his house. How can he have approved a setback of 4.5 meters reduced to 0.0 from the side of his house, ignoring the fact that there is a road dedication between his property and mine, and then to apply for an addition on that side of the house with the said 0.0 setback? This makes no sense at all and is a dangerous precedent. My property line was clearly flagged. I would now have to walk under the eaves of his house. It became obvious to me that he was preventing neighbors and the public using the path on the right-of-way, which I found highly offensive. A public right-of-way has to be maintained and is a legal right of ingress and egress. He placed his shed on Wooden Road. Not only that, he had a ditch dug for his plumbing and electrical lines and placed his own private power pole on Wooden Road. This made it impossible for me to exit my property on foot on Wooden Road beside the house being built. All the land around me will be developed in the future, and land dedicated for road development needs to be kept that way. Bellandine Road, which my house is on, will be punched through to join Wooden Road, but Mr. Liedenfrost has chosen to take over a public road for his own personal use to prevent this. He has expropriated public land, increasing the market value of his property at the expense of his neighbors. The clearing of the land for a septic field has changed the landscape so severely that very large fir trees have fallen across Bellandine Road. I cannot get down Bellandine Road Trail anymore, thus closing off another exit for myself. There are large stands of fir surrounding my property. Fires have become a real concern. Just this past summer, I discovered that grass fires have been started in the large vacant lot adjoining my property, a popular hangout for teenagers to get into trouble and to start fires. Bellandine Road, which my house is on, is a very poorly maintained road, so having access to Wooden Road is important to me for personal safety. I've lived at 2860 Bellandine Road for 33 years, raising 4 children in this lovely rural setting. I feel quite sad to watch what has happened to the lovely forest behind my house. I would hope that you would put a stop to this rampant illegal property development that has gone on at 1905 Wooden Road. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon.
I too would like to speak to R2 because I'm concerned that the directors will lose their ability to represent the public on applications that come before them and on ALR applications. And the other thing that I'm really concerned about, we're hearing a lot from the public about they didn't know. And when the public's unhappy, when they don't know about things, you end up with a full gallery. And I would like to propose, and it's something that I've been working on for a while, and I'm actually working with other community members, is to revamp the notification that the CVRD does for developments or rezonings or what have you, to change it from 60 meters, because 60 meters in a rural community is not sufficient. And you know, there's a lot of things in this that needs to be looked at. I understand fully your procedure fees need to be revamped, but I would ask that this portion and the public notification be given a chance for the public to respond to before you go to first, second, and third readings and to adoption, I would assume, at the board in 2 weeks. If we could have the courtesy of that, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, we'll move on now to Mr. Evans.
Madam Chair, I'm Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. On R2, on the CVRD bylaw 4267, we talk about bypassing the directors and giving the authority to issue development permits to the manager of planning. Madam Chair, I hope that the directors here do not give that away. I think you very well know, had the manager of planning been able to give out development permits without your permission, maybe Cowichan Bay might have lost its aquifer to supply the water. So I think you're very well aware that the people in the wide area, not just 60 meters, but it has to go out further than that, so the public has an input, and so that the public can make a difference like it has done in the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Chair.
Mr. Evans. Seeing no more, I will now move on to a correspondence. So C1, Mr. Tippett. It's grant and aid request, Electoral Area A, Mill Bay.
Madam Chair, thank you. The recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid, Electoral Area A, Mill Bay, Malahat, in the amount of $1,000 be provided to Francis Kelsey Secondary School for 2 $500 bursaries for graduating students residing in Electoral Area A, Mill Bay, Malahat.
Been moved. Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on to C2, which is another grant and aid, Area A, Mill Bay, Malahat.
Madam Chair, the recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid, Electoral Area A, Mill Bay, Malahat, in the amount of $500 be provided to Saanich Inlet Protection Society to support public education.
Been moved. Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on to C3, grant and aid. It should read Electoral Area E, not A, for Cowichan Energy Alternative Society.
Madam Chair, the recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid, Electoral Area E. Okay, sorry. Cowichan Station, Salem, Glenora, in the amount of $500 be provided to the Cowichan Energy Alternatives Society to support the grand opening of the biofuel pump station in Coxsila Business Park.
Been moved by the director of the area. Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on now to grant and aid, Electoral Area B, Shawnigan Lake, South Cowichan Rotary.
Madam Chair, the recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid of Electoral Area B, Shawnigan Lake, in the amount of $500 be provided to South Cowichan Rotary to support the second annual Shawnigan Lake Cleanup Day.
Been moved, second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on now, we have some information. So information, electoral, we have areas, electoral area B, planning, advisory planning committee, and electoral area F, advisory planning commission. Director Acton. This is for information.
Yes, I'd just like to amend that I
Sure.
wasn't absent. I had
okay.
to leave after 2 hours, and so why I'm bringing this up is that was the first APC meeting of our term, at least for Area B, and it was unfortunate that we didn't have enough training and support, I think, for the APC, that they got a little, what would the word be, bamboozled by the developer, and it went on a very long time.
Okay, so a correction in their minutes that Director Acton was in attendance.
But also I'd like to just point out, perhaps somebody could put it on their work plan or review what kind of support is coming for the APCs.
Mr. Tippett.
Madam Chair, I'd like to point out that we're working with Lauren Anderson, who is essentially the administrative person in charge of the APC, to set up a meeting for all APC members in Island Savings Center, tentatively scheduled for the 25th of this month. And we'll have Peter Johnson there to assist them in their orientation, as well as staff, planning staff. So it has been on our agenda. It's just not officially announced yet, but that's our intention at this moment.
Follow up, Director Acton?
Sure, and I'd just like to note that I hope that there is maybe a one-pager of how to run a meeting, perhaps to help the chairs, because it's a big responsibility.
That could be something that could be discussed then.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Director Acton. And Mr. Tippett, we'll move on now to reports. We'll move on to R1, an application of the official community plan for Area F, rezoning application for Couverton Real Estate / Timber West Forest, a report from Development Services Division. Welcome, Kasia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm here today to present to you quite a dull topic, and I've really tried my best.
Nothing's dull here.
There's quite a bit of nuances to this, and I've really tried my best to explain it to you using PowerPoint. So if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to ask me, because there is quite a bit of nuances to this. So
thank you.
Let's get started. So this is regarding an application that came to you in January, and I'm bringing it back to you for further consideration. So this is regarding a OCP amendment and rezoning in Honeymoon Bay for Timber West. As you can currently see, there are 3 lots that exist that are part of this rezoning, plus Lot 21, which is a access road. The applicant is proposing to not only redesignate and rezone the land, but also undertake a boundary lot adjustment in order to isolate the agricultural land area, as well as create a parcel C, which would be for a utility parcel. This is the proposal. If you can recall, there's going to be a mix of commercial and residential on the corner of Gordon Bay Road and South Shore Road. There's going to be a mix of residential, in the orange, 24.4 hectares, 7.2 hectares for light industrial, and then the gray area represents the public utility for a drainage field relating to sewer, and a park dedication of 8.5 hectares. So mostly today we're here to talk about this utility parcel. So the 2 community amenity contributions that Timber West is offering with this application is park dedication, as well as a transfer of a utility parcel. So the reason why we're speaking about the utility parcel is because there's an existing disposal field in Missachi Lake, which is failing. The system was built in 1940 prior to the existence of any environmental or health standards for sewage disposal fields. And the existing field is in no way remotely in compliance with any current regulations. That's very important to understand. And one of the issues is that it's close proximity to Bear Lake. So in 2007, the CVRD conducted a study to identify suitable locations for a new sewage disposal field. And one of the sites that was identified to have great percolation was the Timber West lands, which are this part of the subject property. In 2007, the CVRD applied and was awarded a $1.23 million grant in order to upgrade the utility. But the grant stipulates that all the work must be done by March 31st, 2020, so less than a year from now. And that's all the work. Unfortunately, the grant funding cannot be used towards land acquisition, so we can't use it towards purchasing a property within this region. So the proposal that Timber West brought forward is that they would, in exchange for upzoning their property, they would donate a parcel for a disposal field. So the process to date has been that this first came to the committee on December 5th, 2018, and then it received first and second reading at the January 9th board, as well as the green light to move forward with drafting of covenants, and as well as the scheduling of the public hearing. On January 14th, 2019, that subdivision application that is running concurrently with this application, they were granted what's called a preliminary layout approval, which means they can move forward with meeting the conditions of having that law boundary adjustment approved. But since then, we've had some challenges with determining what that agreement's going to be between Timber West and CVRD, specifically in relation to the two community amenity contributions that they've offered. And the reason why we're asking that the draft covenants be prepared prior to the public hearing is, one, to ensure that there's an agreement between the CVRD and Timber West on what that transfer will look like, both for the park and for the utility lot, but as well as ensure that it's fully disclosed to the public what that agreement is going to be. So normally in an OCP rezoning process, when you talk about community amenity contributions, you go to first and second reading, the applicant drafts the covenants. The covenants are then brought for the public hearing. A public hearing process is held. It then receives third reading. And then the applicant is asked to meet all the conditions, which in this example would be the registration of the covenants. And then the application receives fourth and final reading. And then the transfer of the parcels occurs when there's future subdivision or development. So I want to be clear that there's no statutory process regarding voluntary amenity contributions. This is a negotiation between the local government and the applicant. But the general practice across jurisdictions is to secure the amenity via covenant. Generally, the terms of the covenant state that no further subdivision or development can occur until that community contribution is provided to the local government. And that covenant is very commonly registered prior to adoption, and this is done by applicants as a gesture of goodwill as well as commitment to the project. This is very common practice across jurisdictions. This approach, unfortunately, is not possible with this application because of the CVRD's immediate need to have access to that utility parcel in order to meet that March 31st, 2020 deadline. The other issue with tying it to a covenant is that Timber West has stated that they don't have any future intention to subdivide or develop the land due to market factors. So there's no immediate trigger for them to move forward with ensuring that covenant agreement is met. So staff have informed Timber West of the importance of streamlining this process, as all the work for the disposal field must be completed before March 31st, 2020. And it's critical that the land for the disposal field is transferred to the CVRD as soon as possible. This means that attaining the subdivision approval, which is happening concurrently with this application, be approved by third reading to ensure that utility lot actually exists, because right now it doesn't exist. It's part of a larger parcel. And in order to be able to transfer it to the CVRD, we need to actually have a parcel with a legal description with it. And so it's very important to note that any works that aren't done prior to March 31st, 2020 may likely be claimed against the residents of Missachi Lake. So that 1.23 million, depending on how much of that grant funding is used, if it's not completed in time, could be claimed against the residents. So that's why there is such an impetus to move this forward. So this means that that parcel needs to be transferred to the CVRD prior to final approval. So what we were recommending is we go first and second reading, drafting of the covenants. We'd go to public hearing. That was the intention when we first came to you in January. We'd go to third reading. Timber West would transfer over the utility parcel. We would register the parks covenant, and they would receive final reading and adoption. Timber West has unfortunately been reluctant to agree to these terms. They would like to transfer the parcel over after the bylaw has been approved. They've also been reluctant to make any progress on the subdivision application, which is key to creating that utility lot. And they've voiced the fact that they're taking this approach is their lack of confidence in the application being granted approval. So Timber West did provide alternative solutions to transferring of the utility parcel, but staff have been advised by their legal counsel against any of these options. This is what they're proposing to do. It would be after the fact. Once the approval has been granted, they would then complete the subdivision application and meet all the conditions of the community many contributions. So in terms of the recommendations, staff is recommending first and second reading, the drafting of the covenants, holding a public hearing, third reading, the meeting of the conditions, and then final adoption, like we talked about at the very beginning. There is an alternative option that we have brought forward to Timber West, which would mean that we enter into an unregistered agreement that would stipulate that if the land would be, the utility parcel would be transferred over prior to final adoption, but if within a certain period of time, which would have to be determined, if the application is not approved, the land would be transferred back to the CVRD or back to Timber West. So this is how it would go. The issue with it is that these are the steps that need to be added on. Today, you would have to vote in favor of option number 2. It would then have to go to the board for approval. They would then have to draft the unregistered agreement, have both our lawyers review it. The board would then have to approve that agreement and then go to public hearing. And the concern with this, it actually adds an additional 2 months, and we don't have that time. It also decreases the chances of us meeting that grant deadline, and any costs incurred, once again, that aren't fully completed by that March 21st or 31st deadline could be paid by the Missachi Lake residents. So that's why staff think there's a huge benefit to option 1, which increases our chances of meeting that grant deadline. It addresses a huge health and environmental risk for that area and provides the opportunity for Honeymoon Bay to also have a community sewer system. So staff is recommending resolution number 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Cash? Well, Mr. Dennison, would you like to add something?
Yes, please, Madam Chair. Sorry, just some very new information today from our consultant, just to, it's even more complicated. So the
Asher was doing a good job there. I was following the bouncing ball.
She did a fantastic job. Yes.
Now you're going to mess that up. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Well, just add more.
Okay.
To it.
Add
yes.
more. Thank you.
So our consultant says that. So we've got 3 main components of this project. One is this long force main between Missachi Lake and Honeymoon Bay. The other is the construction of a new disposal field in Honeymoon Bay on this proposed property. And the third is some works in Missachi to kind of connect the existing force main. So the big part of that and the complex and the long part of that is the force main. We've already designed the force main. In fact, we're out for what we used to call tender. It's now RFX. That's out right now. We've had interest expressed by a number of contractors, so that's looking good. But our consultant says that we actually need to award by May 1st to know that we can get this done in time. On the face of it, that doesn't work. It's too late. But staff has been thinking very quickly, and what we need to have is a plan B. We need to know that we're not going to build this pipe and have it go nowhere. When I teach my kids to drive, I say you can't just hope there's nobody there, you need to know there's nobody there. So in the same way, we're not going to build all this, millions of dollars worth or $1 million worth of a pipeline and not know that it's going to go somewhere. So we have an idea, which we're going to just invest. We've done some preliminary, little bit of stuff on it. Just talked to our consultants. We're going to do a little more work. It involves some CVRD land in the area of Honeymoon Bay that we could use for a Plan B just for Missachi if we really, really needed to. It's not a good idea, but at least it's something. So we'll come back to probably at the next meeting with that. We'll need to have that, we need to be authorized that that would be acceptable as a Plan B in order for us to award the work to go ahead. So I just want to give you that. So this is we're on a tight wire here. The other thing is that there's still the other works that need to be done. We've got a little more room for that, but for example, the septic field we'd have to start our design work and approvals May 1st, and then award construction by November 1st. So that would be our maximum window to actually have all these other permutations occur, because that still absolutely needs to happen too. If we don't have a disposal field, we've got nothing. And also the works, even a little more flexibility for the works in the Missachi end. That's more like around December 2020, or 2019. So we got a little more room there. But this is the only way we can figure out to do it, but we desperately need to be able to move ahead at this point. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking to the director of the area.
I think I saw a couple of questions that might want to be asked, so I can perhaps wait for a moment.
I haven't, oh, sorry. Director Smith.
Through the chair to, I need to ask, the funds that were received as a grant, was there not a location in that application for the system to have the grant go forward at that time? And is that area no longer available for the system that was applied for that grant?
Madam Chair, these lands are the area that we applied for. Now, just to be clear about that, this also brings up another good question, which is, well, can't we try some other arrangement? Can't we change the application? So we actually spoke to the funding people last week, and we talked about, well, could we just switch this over to an all Missachi arrangement? Or some had some ideas about how to do that. We're always thinking, and we had a different plan. This is actually the one I talked about earlier. It's more like Plan C or D, but we had a different Plan B. But she said it was awarded partly because we're integrating Missachi and Honeymoon Bay in one system here, right? That's where it's headed, and that's one of the reasons we got the award. So she said that's really different. She said, I'd have to say honestly, you have very little chance of having that approved. Now, if we had, if we were forced into an interim arrangement that still involved disposal in the Honeymoon Bay area, that's pretty close. She said, little tweaks could be considered. So I don't know if that's a little tweak or how big of a tweak that is, but at least we could get that looked into as part of this Plan B option, whether that could be approved or not. But she was pretty clear that a reworking of the whole package was not going to be acceptable.
Director Nicholson. Question for staff? Mr. Dennison or Kasha?
Whoever can answer. Kasha, probably. I guess I'm a little bit confused here. So the recommended resolution, what if Timber West says no? Does that mean we just scrap the whole development? Is that what happens, or?
It would be a goodwill gesture on their part, yes,
I get
to agree.
that, but what's the, if they say no,
then
what's our plan?
Then the option 2, or you can ask for staff to come up with another alternative option.
And option 2 does not get us there in time, though, is what I heard.
Yes, correct.
So
it's unlikely that it will get us there in time.
Okay, got it.
Do you want to?
Sorry, just to say yes.
Mr. Dennison would like to add something?
Yeah, just to be clear, unless we had some other arrangement to go with it, right? Because we're kind of out of time now. So unless there was some other way to make that fit, with a Plan B or something.
Director Salmon?
Thank you. So I'm confused, of course, but what you just said, Brian, new information. So this recommended resolution here is no longer the recommended resolution?
Well, that was the...
No, it's the best option moving forward. But we have been thinking about alternative options because we have a sense that the applicant will not be in favor of this option. So we are bringing forward the option that will get us the results that we need in order to meet this grant deadline, but we recognize that alternative options may need to be considered at this table today.
Director Salmon, a follow-up?
But what did you say, Brian, about we might need to another bring it back at another meeting, this new information?
Sorry, just to be a little clearer about that. So this Plan B, it's not a good idea. It's a way, it's a last ditch. I mean, what it involves is disposal of Missachi's sewage basically right in Honeymoon Bay, right? In lands that the CVRD currently owns. So that's not great. You know, it's not a really good idea. But, and it's not to say that we would, you know, plan to do that, but we'd need to have a commitment to do that in order to have something so that our pipe doesn't go nowhere, right? So that's the best we can do. It's not a great thing at all, but at least it's something. And we just need to have the confidence that there, should the rest of this process not pan out for whatever reason, that we could have this effluent go somewhere. That's the idea. But it's not a wonderful solution on its own for sure, but at least it's something.
Thank you. I have Director Act, and then I'll go to the Director of the area. Oh, and then Director Nicholson.
I feel like there's, thank you, Madam Chair, there's an agreement that's not being mentioned, like saying we need this agreement somewhere in the timeline, because it sounds like somebody's not trusting somebody for it to go through. And so where's that trust, where's that suspicion? Is it at the hearing level that it's not going to go through, or at the board, or where's this mistrust happening that we can help?
So I will just mention that the applicants mentioned that they're concerned that if they transfer over the parcel prior to final adoption will not be granted. And the applicant is here, so you could ask them specifically what their concerns are if they'd like to come and speak.
Director Morrison, you'd like to speak first? Director Morrison? Well, and then I can ask
thank you, Madam
applicant.
Chair. I was hoping that we could field questions and then I could perhaps offer some input. Well, I'll just go ahead. Number of points here. First of all, I'd like to unconfuse maybe a little bit of alphanumeric confusion here. Mr. Dennison spoke about a Plan B. Plan B, don't confuse it with option 2 in our reports, okay? So there's option 1.
He was giving us the information.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
More specifically to, well, I won't go to Director Acton's comments yet, but I think that there's the question of good faith, and there's an offer of an amenity which is it's a very important amenity. I can understand a corporation's desire to have some certainty, and that's what I'm sensing that they're uncertain about yet, and I'm hoping that this committee will see to wholeheartedly endorse whatever recommendation that we come to. I think that will help for them to go back to their masters, so to speak, their board of directors, and to proceed forthwith. Whatever option is chosen today, if it's an uncertain decision that we make, it could put the entire project at risk. And when I say the entire project, I'm not talking about just the solving of the Missachi Lake sewer problem. I'm talking about it could put at risk the future of a South Shore sewer system that could literally take every home that was inclined and every new home that was built and have them on sewage treatment. So I think there's a bit of confidence that we can provide to the applicants with the decision that we make today and how we vote. But I wanted to go to a question to both the staff and the applicant, and that would be, are we able to meet our deadlines should the committee decide to put forward option 2 in the report? Is that still a possibility?
Mr. Dennison.
Yeah, so we would need to, provided that all the necessary agreements and transfers and everything had happened by November. I mean, physically, we can put this pipe in the ground. We can start May 1st. And so long as we're putting that pipe in the ground, these procedures are moving along, and that by November, we're able to start construction in those lands. So we need to have that ability to build in those lands by November 1st. So there is this window between sort of now and November 1st that all this procedure needs to work its way through. Otherwise, you know, if we do have this Plan B, by then we would be having to actually act on that Plan B, right? So that's the thing. The Plan B just gives us enough confidence that there is a possible, for sure, not just a hope, but a for sure we could have in our hands. Not a great one, but at least it's something. And then by November 1st, all this procedure would have to be completed so that we weren't forced to go to that Plan B, that we could in fact build on the lands in confidence because we knew we had them.
Follow-up, Director Morrison.
Well, I'd like the same question to the applicant.
So would the applicant like to come to the podium, please?
And I guess the question to the applicant would be, is there capacity within their organization, should option 2 proceed from today to the board, for them to execute their side of the negotiations?
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Before I get to Director Morrison's question here, I'll speak to a couple things here. First off, I wanted to reaffirm our commitment to this project. We've been actively working on it since 2013. We've gone through multiple iterations to the planning concept. We've had 2 applications to the Agricultural Land Commission that were unsuccessful. We've hosted 2 public meetings on Saturday afternoons and Saturday mornings with the local residents of Honeymoon Bay and Missachi Lake. We've attended the meetings that Brian held with the Missachi residents once the grant was awarded. We are fully vested in fulfilling this process and undertaking the rezoning and ultimately coming to a point where we can donate the lands. We are committed and acutely aware of basically the dire need for the lands to be in the hands of the CVRD. But really where we're at right now is in terms of the mechanics. How does that process really unfold from here forward? And as Kasia alluded to, we've offered a few different solutions that we thought would kind of help bridge the gap between the processes, because we've got a subdivision process that's working over here, and we've got a rezoning process that are working over here. And unfortunately, in a perfect world, they'd be working, you know, basically in parallel. Excuse me. And you would have the subdivision approved and then the rezoning ultimately right there and there. Unfortunately, we're at a stage where we've got the rezoning further along the development chain than we do have the subdivision. So what we had offered at one point in time was, okay, well, if we can get to a certain commitment at 3rd reading, we would register a statutory right-of-way that would provide certainty to the regional district that they would have access to the lands, could use the lands, could have full rights and perpetuity to the lands, and to operate and to construct their sewage disposal field. And then once the subdivision process moves along its process chain, because that can take a while, then once the subdivision is completed, we could have covenants on the land that say the lands would then be donated to the CVRD. If the subdivision isn't completed, the CVRD would still have this SRW in which they would have full rights to use the lands in perpetuity and continue to utilize. So that was one of the solutions that we offered. Unfortunately, it just didn't seem to carry a lot of favor from, I guess it was your legal counsel, and that's, you know, the legal lawyers all have reasons for why they don't support something. Ours has concerns with the process that's being considered right now in terms of the recommendation that's being favored by staff of recommendation 1 and 2. To your point, Director Acton, in terms of trust, it's not necessarily a matter of trust. It's a matter of legal obligation for us. We can't openly donate, and I can't personally go to our board of directors and say, individuals, please donate this land to the CVRD. On good faith. Because they'll look at me and say, we as a board of directors cannot allow you to do that. So we simply can't do that unless we have some form of mechanism that says the lands could be reverted back to Timber West in the event that it fails. We're not a matter of, we don't feel like there's a level of distrust. We feel like ultimately when we got to that point of 3rd reading that there is a level of comfort, but we simply cannot, without some form of legal agreement in place, dedicate the lands blindly. So it's a matter of the mechanics of how do we get to that point. So we're open to different ideas. We're open to different solutions. One of the solutions that Kasia had presented to us was this Land Title Act provision that says we can separate a utility lot and donate it to the CVRD sooner than just the standard typical subdivision process. And we're fully on board with that. We've engaged the surveyor, and he's already given me a deadline of, he thinks that could be done by April 30th their deadline. Of course, things seem to always creep up, and time always seems to extend beyond what it normally is. So you could possibly believe either April 30th or maybe a week or two afterwards. So in terms of creating that parcel, we feel that there is some timeline and there is some certainty on when that parcel can be created, and are fully open and willing to engage in that and donate the lands after third reading. However, there has to be some form of agreement tied to that says if after the lands are donated, the lands aren't, the perimeter lands aren't rezoned or it's denied at fourth reading, then the lands get reverted back. So there's mutual good faith being offered at the same time as we move forward through the process. So in terms of Director Morrison's earlier question, we're fully invested in this process. We're committed to the process. We want to get through this process. We see the value in both the social benefit and to the community, as well as the social benefit for Timber West, and are open to any of the mechanics to ultimately get us there. So,
thank you so much. Director Morrison, do you have a follow-up, or can I go to Director Nicholson?
Go to Director Nicholson, anyone else, and
okay.
I have a
just
recommended
have
resolution.
Director Nicholson on my list.
So I guess I need a little bit more clarification on this Plan B. And so when will you know if...
Well, very shortly, what we need to do, so the indications are that it would be quite suitable. We just have to get our hydrogeologist out there to take a peek. So he goes in with a backhoe for a morning, probably is all he needs, a few test pits. The geology of the area is pretty well known, so it's not likely to be any surprises, but we just need to do a few test pits and have him do that. So he's already indicated an approximate area that we would be required, which is sufficient within this envelope that would be available to us. And so we'll have him do that within the next week or so, I would hope. I have to arrange that with him, but so as soon as we know that, then we can bring that forward. So we just need to know that the ground is suitable. It is CVRD land already.
Follow up, Director Nicholson.
Okay, so I just need to summarize this so I understand. We have two options. One will get us there in time, but we have a high risk that the company will not agree to that. So our backup plan would provide for Missachi Lake, but maybe not for all of Honeymoon Bay.
For this site, that would be true.
That
yes,
would be
it would be adequate for Missachi. There might be a little room in addition. I'm not sure exactly, but
confused it again. No, it just confused it again.
Yeah. What's it?
No, you're confusing it again.
Okay.
Okay.
Kasha.
So option 1 is how you described it. Option 2 is this unregistered agreement where we would transfer.
I haven't talked about option 2 yet. I'm just talking about option 1.
Yeah, so option 1 is what you described.
Option 1 will get us there, but the risk is that the company won't agree, in which
Correct.
case we go to plan B.
No.
Go to option 2.
In your report.
I know.
But
Brian brought forward plan 2, which was just discussed this morning, and it wasn't part of the staff report. So that's why there's confusion, because this is an additional backup plan. So ideally, we would still go forward with Timber West. It's the great location for the sewage disposal field, but if the committee decides to go forward with option 2, they have to be aware of the fact that it means we could not meet our deadline. So what Brian has considered is, okay, what is another additional option that we have? And maybe it's using CVRD land. So really, instead of saying plan B, maybe say option 3, please.
Okay.
So is that clear?
So option 3 can come into effect for either options if either option 1 or 2 fail.
Correct.
So the issue then for us is the level of risk, whether it's on timing or with the company.
Correct.
That's really what the decision here is.
Correct.
Here. And if we end up with option 3 and having to go to the other one, we think we can still get the grant money because Missachi will be taken care of even though Honeymoon Bay won't be. Okay, got it.
All right. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move option 2 in the staff report, and if there's a seconder, I'd like to speak to it, please.
Is there a seconder for option 2? There's been a seconder. Go ahead, Director Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This has been quite an exercise, and it's one of those challenging ones that some great things happened early on in the process. But as an elected official, when we get into the design works and negotiations with with applicants that the area directors have to, by necessity, step back and let our professional staff do the work that they need to do. And I think that staff have gone above and beyond and have invested significant time, effort, and energy into making this, or preparing this report and all the work that's gone into this. And I understand when staff make a recommendation, it's given all their best professional advice. They prepared the second option as a less desirable option that would put some of the onus into the hands of the applicant if we are to make the deadlines around the grants and the like. And it's a private company. It is, or it's a company. It's an organization that is wanting to do a lot of things in the community, and I think this is a potential not just win-win, but win-win-win. And I don't believe that when we've had indications from the applicant that option 1 is not a desired option for them, and option 2 is one that they would be more than willing to work towards. Yes, there is still the risk of some timelines being a challenge, but I looking at this, realizing that I'm not a planner, I'm not a sewage treatment specialist, and I'm just an elected official working off the best information that's made available to me. And knowing that I've attended those meetings with the community, I've been in Missachi, I've actually walked in their sewer system, and that has to be addressed. And there's an increasing awareness amongst people who live along bodies of water that putting sewage to ground in the form of individual septic systems is just a non-starter these days, and that we need something that's more sophisticated. And there's been a lack of growth in our communities for a number of years, and this will help to not only stabilize the impact that individual current septic systems are having on groundwater in the lake, but also future development that'll happen. So I'm sort of going a long way around to say that I think that despite the recommendation of option 1, everything that I've heard from my community in support for moving forward, I think if we are supportive of this resolution and the applicant sees our support for this resolution, that it will hopefully send them away willing to work hard to make those deadlines, to help us meet those deadlines, and they will be met. So I hope you will support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Nicholson?
So I guess I am a little bit worried about then the greater risk that the taxpayers of Missachi Lake will end up, because it seems like we probably won't make the deadlines for the grant, and so if the grant doesn't come through, that's an issue.
I'm not an expert in all the paperwork that needs to be done. I believe it's doable, so long as everybody's doing their very best to move it quickly along. It's from our perspective for the Water Management Division, we're not planners, we're not developers, so we're not familiar with how long these things seem to take. It seems to me that if there's rapid work on this back and forth to resolve whatever issues are necessary in the paperwork, it seems quite doable, provided everybody's putting their effort into it. But I just did need to have the confidence in order to initiate that construction on the pipeline, to have something in hand. So that's why we've got that. It does seem, the planners would have to comment on that, but it seems doable provided we have everybody working hard.
The reason why staff put forward option number 1 is we've lost 3 months already since it came to the board, and we're not anywhere further along. And so that's why staff are really pushing for option 1, because this is where we're at right now, and it's not a good sign. So from planning's perspective, there's a lot of steps we still have to go through. We're not even halfway through yet, and we're having this many challenges. So,
Director Kuhn?
I don't think we'll find an ideal solution for this, And I support Director Morrison's move that I think this option is the best possible at this time. There's no way that we can have any resolution here that we know is going to work 100%. So we have to take a chance no matter what. And I think that's the best chance. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to have Mr. Tippett read out option 2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that an agreement with Timber West be negotiated under which a utility lot pursuant to official community plan amendment and rezoning application for Couverton Real Estate / Timber West Forest 2 Limited be transferred to the CVRD before consideration of final adoption of the OCP Amendment by Law 4256 and Zoning Amendment by Law 4257, on the condition that if final adoption is not given within a specified period of time, the utility lot would be transferred back to Timber West.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? One opposed. Motion is carried. That will go to the April 10th board. Thank you. Moving on now to R2, which is a development application procedure and fees bylaw. And I'd like to welcome Allison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The development application procedures and fees bylaw. It outlines the process that planning applications follow, and it sets the associated fees. And this new bylaw proposes changes to both process and application fees. The reasons for the report and the new bylaw are to address an item on the 2019 Land Use Services Department Work Plan and also to address efficiencies in the Development Services Division. So I prepared a few slides on some of the highlights of the report. I'm not planning to discuss every aspect of the proposed changes, but certainly if there are questions about them, we can discuss them. The first slide I have is on the change to process for development variance applications, and this basically removes the electoral area director's discretionary decision-making to determine the process path for development variance permits. So you can see on the left-hand column the existing process going down. There's sort of the optional referral to the APC, so basically staff would contact the director and say, would you like this application to go to the Advisory Planning Commission or not? Following that, letters are sent to adjacent property owners within 60 meters. Then it proceeds to the Electoral Area Services Committee and Board. The proposed process would have no APC referral. The letters would go to the adjacent property owners within the same specified distance. Then the application would proceed to the Electoral Area Services Committee and Board. There is benefit to the proposed process in terms of it's a clear path forward. There's certainly the opportunity for this committee to refer an application back to an APC after it's been presented to the committee as a whole. And in terms of the community input, with the letters being sent to the adjacent property owners, that is a sound form of community input. Development variance permits, they're site specific and they target a limited area. So in planning staff's recommendations, soliciting input from that targeted area, it makes sense. It's not necessarily the type of application that affects an entire electoral area. And anecdotally, this is the process that most development variance permits take. They don't often get referred to APCs. The next.
Can I just interject for a second?
Sure.
So I'm just confirming that there is an option once it comes to the board that the board can refer it to the APCs.
Certainly that's an option that the committee has.
The committee has another, because we heard some discussion. Okay, thank you.
Yes. As far as ALR applications, so I should clarify the report. We're proposing two separate paths. So depending on the specific nature of the ALR application. So the first is ALR applications when the proposed use does not comply with zoning. We are still recommending those be referred to the Advisory Planning Commission. Without speaking to the director directly, this is the path these types of applications would take. And these types of applications would be subdivision to provide a residence for a relative. I don't know if you're all familiar with these types of applications, but they're basically applications to subdivide land in the ALR that do not comply with local government zoning. The second type on the slide is ALR applications for inclusion, exclusion, and where the use complies with zoning. And an example of when use complies with zoning, many of the A1 zones in your electoral areas, they allow for a second residence. However, the ALC requires a non-farm use application. So in that, the proposed use complies with our zoning. So we're proposing in those situations that there's no referral to the Advisory Planning Commission. It goes directly to the Electoral Area Services Committee. And for inclusion and exclusion applications, the ALC general regulation requires a 60 to 90 day turnaround. We're supposed to provide our local government response to the ALC within that time frame, and that's just not possible when there's an Advisory Planning Commission referral built in. So the proposed for ALR applications for inclusion, exclusion, and when the use complies with zoning, the existing process is again this optional referral to the APC, then the Electoral Area Services Committee and Board, and then if the Board chooses to, the application is forwarded to the Agricultural Land Commission, and we are essentially proposing that there's no APC referral for these types of ALR applications. My final slide is with respect to...
Would you like, can we do questions? Oh, wait, okay, sorry, carry on.
Sure. This is the final topic I'll present on, and then we can open it up.
Okay, thank you.
This slide presents the proposal to increase fees related to applications to amend the zoning bylaw or OCPs. So this is shows the existing and the proposed. So the fees to amend the zoning bylaw and the OCP are proposed to be increased higher than the average development applications that are also being proposed. There's sort of a small increase to all those types of applications. But for zoning and OCP amendments, we're proposing a higher increase, and that is because of the significant time expended on these types of applications and the goal of recovering more costs through development applications, because what we're seeing is we recover like 15% of the cost from the development application, and the result is that the larger community is subsidizing those development applications. So we're trying to shift that cost somewhat to the developers who are the beneficiaries of the development, if approved. You'll also notice that the cost for advertising in the local newspaper is being removed, or will be an additional cost. The cost of advertising is, it varies a lot depending on, it's significant, and it varies depending on the complexity of the application. So we're proposing to invoice that separately to more accurately reflect that actual cost. And then the final slide I've got just shows a comparison with other jurisdictions within the region, and then north of the valley and south. And if you're able to absorb all that information, basically what we're proposing is in the higher range, but within the range of adjacent jurisdictions. I'll just go to my next slide. It's the actual recommendation.
Thank you. I have Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I feel like these are two different things that we should be looking at. Looking at the fees, like I support the fee structure that you're talking about, but I'm having a real disconnect with the APC part of it. And I feel like at the CVRD there's been a slow chipping away of our APCs, and essentially we are mayors without council. And so our volunteers and our APCs and our commissions, we really need those. And I know that the harmonization was a direction of lowering the APCs. And I'm feeling really uncomfortable with the recommendation on the APC side. And so in order to take away essentially their influence, I would like to see it as a whole. So along with the approving officer, what is that going to chip away at? What kind of things is that going to influence? We've got that coming. What kind of influence is the harmonization going to do to our APCs? And so that's where I'm at right now. I'd like to see these two things divided and discussed separately.
Can I address that
yes,
somewhat?
Sure.
No, I can't necessarily speak to harmonization, the approving officer, but in writing this report and preparing the amendment bylaw, a thought was put into where APC referrals are best used. And for development variance permits, I maintain the point that we do solicit community input through the letters to adjacent property owners, which we always attach to the committee report. So the committee is able to consider that information from the community at that time. So it's perhaps redundant to have an APC referral as well. And then when it comes to the ALR applications, if a use complies with zoning, then I don't think we have solid grounds for slowing an application down to the Agricultural Land Commission, because the community has essentially approved of those uses when it adopted the zoning bylaw. So to take a second look APC at that use is not the most appropriate method, I think, in processing those ALR applications. Where the use does not comply with zoning, we are still recommending the APC referral. And I'd like to speak to an earlier point as well. We're not proposing any changes to delegations. That's not a part of this proposal at all. So it's just changes to clarify the process for DVPs and ALR applications. Because right now, the way the procedures bylaw is written, it is not clear what the process path is. And that leaves applicants, landowners who are going through these processes, uncertain about the length of time things are going to take. And I also will repeat the point that this committee can refer an application back to the APC. It's not necessarily advised on a regular basis. Again, we want clear process, but if it's warranted, that is certainly an option.
Director Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to staff. I've got 2 items on our list here. Number 8, the create one fee for sign permits rather than varying fees per sign size. Went in and spoke to staff about this particular, and I also have a second item too, but one at a time. For the most part, if someone is going to start a home-based business or the likes and is looking to hang their shingle outside their property, the rules are fairly clear and straightforward. When I inquired of staff, this is more to the sort of major thoroughfares and likely more of a larger size, that sort of thing, and perhaps a clarification or an explanation. It seems to me that at $150 to do just about anything around here, we're losing money. And I think that there's probably a better fee structure or rate than what's being proposed. But I would like to hear how staff came to this recommendation.
Allison. Oh, Mr. Tippett? Would you like?
Well,
oh, okay.
I'll take a stab at it.
Okay.
I think for the general applications, there was just a general increase added that was linked to inflation and the general time that applications that planning staff effort is expended on applications. So perhaps there's merit in reviewing that more specifically, if that's the direction the committee wants to provide. But this was all that we're proposing at this time.
Okay. Director Morrison.
Follow up to another section, section 11, which is the fees. If you could.
It's right there, I think.
Right, yeah, sure. Let's use that one. Yeah. I'm just looking at this and knowing the cost structure and how much is in. I know that I think Ms. Garnett had mentioned a number in the teens as far as our cost recovery on applications such as mentioned here, and I just would throw this out there to committee in that I think that the new combined rate of 5,000 for a combined joint application, OCP and rezoning, makes sense to me. But I was going to suggest that we might want to contemplate raising the rezoning only application amount to from $2,200, which is currently staying the same, to by $300 to $2,500. That would give, if you were doing them separately, it would be a $5,500 cost. And if you do them jointly, you could save about 10% of the cost. So I just throw it out there to committee as to what their thoughts are in regards to that.
Any comments to the 2,500 versus the 22? You're a bargain shopper. Director Acton?
Can I move it, this idea?
Well, that would be, you would like...
Could we amend it or suggest it?
Suggest it. that be 25. It's amendment to the, so would you like to amend it to 2,500? Director Acton?
Sure. Yes, please. Amend it to 2,500.
Okay, and then there's a seconder on that amendment. So there is an amendment on the floor, and you want to speak to the amendment. Is there any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, I'm going to call Director Nicholson. You're amending the 2,200 to 25 for the rezoning. The zoning amendment is 22 currently on the top of the chart.
I'll go to the earlier slide.
Okay, there we go. That's it.
So the proposed fee for zoning amendment is $2,200 plus the cost of the ad. And the amendment, if I understand it correctly, is to increase that by $300 to $2,500 plus the cost of the ad.
Any questions on the amendment? Anything else on the amendment? So on the amendment, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Now, there is a resolution for this with the amendment as amended. Anybody do you want to speak to that? There is the recommendation with the 2,500.
It has not been moved yet.
No, it has not.
I have a recommendation. I would like to vote on those two, the two items separately, the fee structure and the procedures.
Voting on them separately.
Madam Chair, what I would suggest, you made an amendment to something you hadn't even had a motion on.
Yeah, that's true.
So what I'm going to suggest is that one of you makes a motion to recommend the first component. And if your colleagues agree with you, then you can deal with that item, and then you can address the second item, and you can make the motion with the amended amount as you've made in the previous resolution. So I would strike that previous amendment because you didn't even have a motion on the floor.
Yeah.
So
sure.
if one of the directors wants to make a motion on the first element of this, if you're inclined to separate.
So we just have an amendment in the air. Okay. Director Morrison.
I think I might have a path forward here.
Okay.
Because I think the staff report has got us divided into two sections. We've got the amendments to development application process, and we've got amendments to application fees.
Okay.
So bear with me, I'll do this in two parts. I'll move to refer the development application process considerations back to committee for further discussion.
Okay. Just a minute. Okay.
That's all
been, okay. Yep. That's been moved. Is there a seconder? It's been seconded. So all in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried.
And as a second motion, I would move that the amendments to application fees, including an increase to the rezoning fee to $2,500, be moved.
It's been seconded. Didn't we all in favor? Oh, sorry. Yes, you could speak to it. Yes. Okay.
So I was hoping to ask a question for clarification on the fee stuff. So
clarification on all the fees?
Well, this is not taking us to 50% cost recovery, is it?
That's correct. It's not.
But could you put your chart up again, please? But it is making our costs in line with, it looks like, other jurisdictions pretty much.
Yes, I mean, as the report notes, the fees haven't been reviewed since 2001. So, yes, it will be bringing them up more in line and increasing cost recovery from 15% to 19%. So it's a far ways off from 50%.
But it says in the report that we haven't kept pace with the 39% inflation. So we're still from back when we first started this. So I'm just wondering if this is enough. If at this point, if
the
we're
numbers
targeting 50%.
Right. That's correct. We've not been so ambitious as to propose a 50% cost recovery. But what I think is important to note is that these costs, the cost of the ad has been removed. So an ad can be $1,500 to $2,000 or more. And so that the applicants will be invoiced separately for that. So that's an important consideration here if an application gets as far enough to a public hearing.
Okay.
And the comparators, and yeah.
So it might be worth trying for a year.
So, Director Morrison.
I went silent and whispered and forgot to add to the end of the resolution that I put forward in regards to the amendments to application fees, and that they be forwarded to the board for consideration of 3 readings and adoption.
Okay. And that's what we're voting on currently. It's been moved and seconded. Now can I call the question? Is there anybody else? Okay, call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you so much. Moving on now to R3. Director Nicholson.
So just to the question of further discussion on that, I was wondering if staff could put some thought into the not just the APC, but in general the process. In general, it's a part. Well, there's one question about streamlining processes so that we're making them as efficient as possible for everyone. And I'm not necessarily convinced that APCs have much to do with slowing things down. But I think we need to think about the process at the same time when we have the discussion. And we also need to think about the process that we use for communicating with the public. I recognize we use the minimum requirements. And quite frankly, 60 meters in a rural setting makes no sense, right? If I wanted to do something at my house, my neighbor next door on 2 sides of me would get a letter. And that really doesn't reflect the neighborhood or the community and on some of the things that are possible for you to want to do. And, often people don't see the signs that are put up because they're kind of
Something
not
to
so
think
great
about.
either. So I just think that we need to think about it because this is about service to the community. This is about the community's community, and we really should be seeking good input from them. And I would like us to think about that when we have the next discussion.
Thank you. Good idea. Microphone, Director Morrison.
Madam Chair.
Sorry, we're still in the process of.
I haven't heard you vote.
Excuse me, still in the process. Sorry?
You didn't vote on the number 1 part of it.
Yes, we have.
Well,
And excuse me, we are conducting the meeting, and you will be able to speak later on. I don't know if I'll check with staff. Director. Mr. Morano, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
R3.
We have
Ticket information authorization amendments.
Yes. We have before you an amendment to the ticket information authorization bylaw number 3209. This bylaw was adopted in 2008 and has had several amendments since then. And this amendment bylaw is going to improve the organization of the schedules, add to, remove, and correct errors that were placed there over time. All of the changes are outlined in in front of you on your devices. Does anyone have any questions?
Are there any questions for Mr. Morano? Seeing none. There is a recommendation. I move. Is there a second? And moved and seconded. And I can call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you so much. We're going to have a 5-minute break. Doing a lot of thank yous. Welcome back. We'll begin now with R4. This is a report from Development Services for an application on 1905 Wooden Road. Welcome, Mr. Munn.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, committee members, public and staff. I'm here to present Development Variance Permit DVP 19B01 at 1905 Wooden Road in Area B, Shawnigan Lake. This is an amendment to the zoning bylaw 985, section 6B3. A variance is requested for the extension of a side setback from 4.5 meters to 0.0 meters. I'd like to call your attention, first of all, a minor amendment to the report. There was a typo in referring to policy 4.2 on page 3. It should be policy 4.1.9, which is quoted earlier in the report. The property is located north of Shawnigan Lake, adjacent to the old railroad right-of-way and the undeveloped roads of Wood Road and Bellandine Road. It's also just south of Shawnigan Creek. The property is largely second growth forest. There are 3 zone permits, single family dwellings and accessory buildings, and is largely the predominant zone in the area. The existing situation shows a structure within the setbacks. Bellandine on the right is considered the front yard, as it's the narrower frontage on a road. And the exterior side setback is from Wooden Road, 4.5 meters. So you can see those distances outlined in gray on this drawing. The map also shows slope and the riparian assessment area of 30 meters from Shawnigan Creek. The survey confirms that this situation, the existing structure is where it is. The red arrow here points to a property marker pin in the property line on adjacent property. That's approximately the 10-meter right-of-way in the February picture there. The earlier slide was from the fall, looking west, I believe. The yellow arrow points to the shed, which is located on the road right-of-way. Oops, I'll just go back. I want to go back. Well, I'll leave it here. In conclusion, there isn't too much to say. There's no historical pattern to justify a variance here, and there's no constraints regarding a large clump of trees cited in the policy, the OCP policy. The topography is not a big challenge, neither habitat or the creek. In large part, the structure is too close to the travel lane and utilities of the 10-meter right-of-way adjacent, which will be developed in time.
Thank you very much. Does the applicant wish to add anything? That's okay. Do you want to press the microphone?
So bear with us.
That's no problem.
Okay.
Everybody's had a first time at the podium. Not a problem.
I think the first thing that I wanted to bring up. There we go. The first thing I wanted to bring up is this all occurred because of a surveyor error. We had hired a surveyor out of Duncan that was certified by the BC Land Surveyor Association to confirm our survey of this lot. You can see in the left picture the green line painted on the ground, which outlines the house footprint that was proposed. And then we were given a survey, which I have here, that we were told reflected that green line. Address it in the rest of what I'm going to say here, but basically it shows that we thought the house was sited 21 feet further south and 66 feet further east than what it actually is. And the shed is on the right of way. It is on concrete blocks, so it's a pretty easy move for us that we're definitely willing to accommodate. I'm gonna let you read this.
Okay. So we just kind of wanted to start by giving you guys background on why we chose to build in Shawnigan. We chose to build here because we wanted to live in a small community where people actually know their neighbors and look out for one another. Having both grown up in larger cities, we felt like we were missing out on a chance to really integrate into our communities. Once we move, Jackson plans to join the volunteer fire department, and I'm doing my teaching degree. I'm just about to finish, and I've already applied for local jobs in the area. So we've we've kind of put everything we have on the line to build this house and to invest in our future. We sold our apartment and to cover the down payment and used most of all of our savings to cover up construction costs. We moved into our friend's apartment where they were generous enough to let us use an extra bedroom. Since then, they've sold the apartment and we're staying on friends' couches here and there. This is our third move since August. But before this error surfaced, we were on track to move into the house on March 12th. We've had a stop work order on it since January, I believe, 6th. Jackson is building the house with his own hands. He's been working nights and weekends with the help from a few friends to lift the heavy walls. His grandfather did a similar thing at his age, and it was really cool for us to be able to experience a similar thing. We designed the house to be as minimal as possible, not to follow the latest trend, but because we have a very limited budget. The idea was to start small and leave room for growth as our lives changed without having to move when we needed more space. So applying for this variance was something we never planned to do, and something that has kept us up at night since January when we learned about the surveyor error. Since then, we have been accused of many disheartening and untrue things. The most disturbing of all is that the house was actually incorrectly located intentionally for some sort of personal gain. I can assure you that's not the case here.
Do you want me to take over?
Sure.
Yeah, so I've got the surveys there for you to look at. The idea that we would do this intentionally is a bit ridiculous. I've been in the industry for 11 years as a carpenter. I'm a Red Seal carpenter. And been a project manager for the last 4 years. So I know that part of the building is you get a survey to show the final location. So if we were to do this intentionally, I know that it would be caught and would definitely not be okay. I've already noted the distances that were wrong on the survey, and we filed a formal complaint with the BC Land Surveyors Association, and we're awaiting a trial with them and Kenyon Wilson in the matter to see what will be done to them for such a large error. And I imagine if we can afford it, it'll end up in civil court after that to try and regain some of our expenses for the lost time here. Knowing the boundaries as they exist now and how they relate to the surrounding landscape, I'm not even sure we ever would have bought this property in the first place. When we bought the land, there was that cleared area that you can see in the photo, which was the obvious building lot. And what we were told by the surveyors and the realtor that we spoke with suggested that was complete reasonable space to build the house. And we know that only about half of that area is able to be built on with the setbacks. We would never really try and cheat the system. It's just not part of who we are. And like I said, I know that there's no way that this would ever work if we were to try it. And it would be an insane thing for us to do to put all of our future and a year of hard work on the line. If this application gets denied and we're unable to complete the project, I'm not really sure what we would do next. At this point, our financial options are pretty limited, and we're afraid of having to walk away entirely. Leaving the property as it is, we'd never be able to sell it, and having to pay the rent on a place to live in the meantime and the mortgage, it could take us years before we could even consider completing the construction. Obviously, there's a lot of miscommunication here, and we're in a pretty bad situation. But I hope you can see that this was not intentional, especially now that we're here looking at the potential of losing all of our savings, our dream, and our house. Yeah, I just hope you see this was not intentional, and we tried to do our very best to work within the bylaws and the rules, and a surveyor has led us to where we are today. And then I also wanted to bring up a letter that I have from the Ministry of Transportation, because we are infringing on a road allowance. They have took this position that if we get the variance today, they're willing to give us an encroachment permit to allow the house to stay where it is.
Okay, thank you. Director, is this to the applicant or to staff?
To the applicant, Madam Chair. So if I'm understanding this correctly, everything was done beforehand. The surveyor's report came back to you and indicated that everything was okay.
Yeah. So the survey, the first one that I passed around, shows the house in well within the boundaries. We were under the impression we had left 15 feet between the outside of our house and the south boundary. The intention there, I think it was brought up in Ms. Ford's letter, that we wanted to put an addition on the house in the future if we were able to. So that was the idea behind leaving the space. Obviously, that's not an option at all anymore, so we're not looking for that at all. I'm willing to abandon that plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Follow up, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
And if I understand it again correctly, the consequences of this variance being denied is that's the end of anything that you can do there, right?
More or less. We've kind of got everything we have in this. I've come up with a couple solutions that could work in the future. But there's nothing that we can really do right now if this is denied wholeheartedly.
Okay. I wonder. Sorry, Madam Chair.
Follow up, Director Wilson.
I wonder if staff can confirm that there is nothing else that can be done if this was or this would be the end of the application.
I'm not sure that's staff's job, but
That's fine.
I'll check. Because
I might be able to speak to that a little bit. There are things that could be done. They would all require moving the house. The impression that I'm under. And given the landscape, you can see in the picture here, pretty much everything slopes away from the house quite dramatically in every direction. So this is really the only flat spot. So if we were to move the house, to design a fairly elaborate structural system to carry the house, as well as find a way to pick it up and move it about 15 feet as a minimum.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I think you're in a very unfortunate situation.
I think so too.
And I can see that it would be really stressful for you, and you've been, no doubt, losing sleep for a long time. But when these kind of variances, we can't, or I personally cannot accept it, because we hear lots of that sets a precedent for everyone else for a sad story, and I believe your sad story. It is not great, but unfortunately I can't. I wish you guys luck, or for me personally, I will be voting to support staff on this, and we kind of have to. This is the only thing that we have in a regional district is our bylaws and our zoning. So it's unfortunate, and I hope you'll be able to resolve it.
Director Smith, do you want to move? Okay. Director Smith.
I noticed in the letter from Susan Ford that she indicated that she made the realtor aware of her property lines months ago, and that she pointed this out to you as an owner of the property, and that there was a dedicated road. So there appears to have been, maybe your realtor was not indicating also where some of the property lines were. Have you gone back to the realtor to have discussions with regards to that?
We have talked to the realtor. They are not going to take any fault in the matter. What the confusion was is we were told that the property lines were flagged with pink flags to show all of the property boundaries. And when we went to the site to look at it before we purchased it, we saw a whole bunch of pink flags, but they actually were marking, well, now we know from going to this point that those flags were marking the other side of Wooden Road and not our side of Wooden Road. So that's largely where this has come from. And actually, I had not talked to Susan about the property boundaries. She had mentioned where her property line was, and I said that from talking to surveyors and officials in the area that I was told a different story. And that was kind of where that conversation ended. So the point that we continued to build the house with intention and knowing that we were incorrectly located is not true. We were working off of a surveyor's report and doing the best of our ability to follow that guideline.
Follow up, Director Smith?
I'll be supporting the motion by Director Acton.
So are you, Director Acton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move the recommendation by staff, please.
Is there a seconder? It's been moved and seconded. And I'm going to call the question, seeing no other hands up. More discussion? Director Salmon.
It's a question. So you said you registered a complaint with the Surveyors Association?
Yeah, with the BC Land Surveyors Association.
Any indication how long that takes to get a response?
They said they've got their first hearing in about 3 weeks, and that's the first step in what could be a 6-month to 1 year process.
Could I maybe just ask staff what tends to happen in this kind of case where there is actually a surveyor's error? If there is proven to be one, does that change the recommendation?
I don't, Mr. Munn.
I've only been involved with one other case, similar situation, and it wasn't a surveyor error. It was a construction error, and they moved the house. And so I'm not familiar with the BC surveyor process.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up, Director Salmon?
Well, just I was wondering about the possibility, could we defer a decision on this and pending the outcome of...
The recommendation has been moved and seconded.
So we'd have to turn it down and then...
Well, it's the director of the area that has moved it.
Okay.
Could I bring up an option that I had as a solution that might work for everybody in this, or is this not the...
Well, we actually have a recommendation on the floor right now, so
okay.
We'll have to hold. So I'm seeing no other... He could speak to it? Absolutely, it's still on the floor. We haven't...
I'd just like to say, we have to be careful here. We can't suddenly pick some that are on a boundary line and some aren't. To me, it's pretty... It either is and isn't. It's unfortunate for their situation. There's a positive. Your house isn't fully built. Maybe there is some salvaging to be had. And then what do we do the next time? Well, I think we have to keep perspective. Thank you.
Okay, Director Wilson. And it is, our sole jurisdiction is land use.
Yeah. I'll be voting in favour of the applicants here. I think they're being a little bit unfairly treated. And there is two things that come up to mind here. There's the letter of the law and there's the spirit of the law. And to be quite honest, I think we're sticking too much to the letter here as opposed to the spirit. And I think we're being a bit unfair.
Director Salmon.
I think just to respond to Director Acton, as far as precedent, I think if in this case there did turn out to be a surveyor error, that would be quite unusual and it would change. We wouldn't have to worry about precedent unless there were other surveyor errors.
Currently, that's not in our application, but Director Morrison.
Thank you. And this is one of those tough ones from my perspective, in that there's allegation of error from a professional, and the issues we're having with reliance on professionals in some circumstances. In some sense, I don't know, and I'm concerned about voting on something that I'm not aware of, because I don't know whether a denial from the regional district is actually something that bolsters their circumstances in their outside case. I do know that there's a difference between people that are in the construction industry that are playing fast and loose with rules, and that maybe a little sloppy and get caught. There's a little different perspective that I have, and cognizant of what has been said before me, but there's circumstances where people do the best they can with the information that's been made available to them, and they find themselves to be offside, and that's I'm not wanting to create a circumstance of undue hardship. And looking at what we're facing here, we've got people that are, and it is land use, that are essentially barely within their property boundary. And I can't say that it's through no fault of their own. I can't say that it's the fault of a professional that should have provided better advice. I'm just reluctant right now to make a decision that will cause undue hardship that essentially doesn't have a remedy. And I think that's what we're doing here. I don't know that this is a circumstance where someone has bought the last lot in a subdivision that it's impossible to make whole unless they have a variance. This is, as I say, something that looks like it's based on their best information, and the best information is lacking. So I still haven't decided how I'm going to vote.
Okay, Director Salmon.
So just to be clear, so I'll be voting against the recommendation to deny because I think it's premature before we know all the facts, and I'd like to see this come back when we know the outcome of the surveyor's decision.
Director Acton.
So I have a question for staff, and I hear what my colleagues are saying, and yes, if, I can be empathetic as well. If this was denied, what would happen? Does it mean it's approved, or where does it go? Could it go?
Mr. Munn?
We could just have another motion.
Thank you, Chair.
Are you saying, okay?
If this motion,
this
motion
this
is denied,
motion that is on the floor
then
fails,
what happens?
then somebody would, yeah, okay. Director Munn. I'm Director Munn. Mr. Munn. Sorry, demotion, I'm sorry.
Yes, if the board denies this, then they'll be in contravention of the bylaw, and we'll have bylaw enforcement action. And then we'll have to decide what bylaw enforcement action takes place.
Director Kuhn.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought the question was a different one. What is going to happen in the opposite side?
Yes.
If we don't go along with the recommendation, what is going to happen then?
I guess so the converse, if you're saying you want to approve the variance to 0 meters, then the building would be allowed to stay where it is. There's still a question of a projection of the building eave into the road right-of-way. You've had a preliminary comment from the Ministry of Transportation about an encroachment permit. I don't know if I can read your letter here. The Ministry will wait until the CVRD has determined if a development variance permit will or not be granted. Once that has been completed, the Ministry will continue the permitting process if the variance has been granted. If the variance has not been granted by the Ministry, will not grant an encroachment permit. As the Ministry does not have a stance at this time, pending the decision of the CVRD, I do not think the letter would be of much assistance. So they haven't given us any direction, but if you agree, then it goes back to highways as well about, do we allow encroachment of the eave of the house onto the road right of way? If they say no, they'll have to do something about that, or face some action from the Ministry on that.
Director Acton.
Okay, I'll try better at my question. If at the table right now, the recommendation from staff fails, is there an option for us to wait until we hear back from the Surveyors Professional Association?
Chair?
Mr. Munn.
I might defer to a senior staff, but I think you could defer the motion altogether and table the motion.
We might get some help here with Mr. McDonald with some technical matters from enforcement.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. My understanding is that this, the variance is for a 0 to 0 lot line, that you'll be right up against the property line then?
There's about 6 inches between the house and the property line right now.
There may be building code issues as well then. So there's usually non-combustible construction for a face right up to the property line and no windows. Are you aware of that?
I am aware of it, yeah, and it is something that we could address if needed.
Okay, I just wanted the board to be aware that there may be construction issues as well.
Okay, thank you. So there's not just, okay, Director Smith.
I can see a possibility of the building being jacked up and relocated. It may require stilts or something to reposition it on the property, and that if we deny this, they will have a stronger case at the for involving the survey that was not correctly done. If we deny this, this gives them the opportunity to have a strong case, and they can also look at repositioning the house. Those things are possible. We've seen how many houses jacked up and moved many places. Thank you.
Thank you. So there is still a motion on the floor where the applicant wishes to add some more to this.
I just wanted to speak to the idea of jacking up the house and moving it. That was something that I had thought of and we had considered. I actually had addressed it with one of the neighbors, but haven't heard a response yet. It's something that I can do. Given where the house is right now in its phase of construction, we can actually lift up the house and engineer essentially a platform that it would be built on. The problem we're having is getting the structure into that property to move the house, given the lack of access. So what I would propose is that we can put it on this platform, and when that road does get built, and we have the access to get a proper piece of equipment in there, we could move it then with relative ease, and that would be something that we could afford to do. Given the opportunity to move into the house, having the equity in the house, we would have the money to be able to do that at the time.
Okay, seeing Director Morrison.
It pains me to do this, but I'm going to recommend this be referred to a later date until after their hearing with the professionals, land surveyors, has been completed.
So do I get a seconder on referral? It has, you do have a seconder. Is there any discussion on referral? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of referral to another time? It's been moved, and it's been moved, seconded, and approved. Okay, so that one is been referred. Okay. Moving on now to R5, Ms. Herrera.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Welcome.
Okay, this is application number 01C17RS, and it is for an official community plan amendment and rezoning application for the property along Fisher Road. And the property does not have a civic address, but is identified by its parcel identifier 025-580-311. And I'll provide a brief overview of the application and open up for questions. And excuse me, the applicants, Grant McKinnon and Rick Buckles, are also in attendance and happy to answer questions as well. The subject property is within Electoral Area C, within close proximity to the Trans-Canada Highway. And the property has frontage on Fisher Road, and the lot is 6 hectares in size, or 15 acres if you prefer. The aerial photo here helps provide a bit more context as to what is existing on the site and surrounding area. And the subject property is treed at the front along Fisher Road. There's been some clearing at the rear, and sand extraction has occurred in the past there. The building with the orange colored roof that you can see within the property boundary is also on the lot, and it's on a lower portion of the lot that is essentially fully integrated with the abutting property, which contains the Pacific Homes business and Rona store. So there's a few pictures of the property. There's trees along the frontage there, and the access is relatively flat and at grade with the road. And some other pictures here taken from the rear of the lot, one from the lower area and one from the upper area of the lot, and you can just see how the topography changes on the lot here. And just another couple of photos of more the interior of the lot, and this is generally where the sand extraction has taken place. And in the right-hand photo, the tree line above the cut is generally the rear property line and the abutting property. And this is the OCP map for the area. The entire subject property is designated agricultural in the OCP, which is the light green color on the property. And to the west, the properties are also agricultural, and a small portion of ALR abuts the property in that northwestern corner, and that is shown by the green hatched lines. The industrial designation is on both sides of the property, and the highway commercial designation is across the street. And moving on to the zoning map, the property is currently split zoned. The northern portion of the lot is zoned I1C, which is the purple color, and this corresponds as well to that Pacific Homes building with that orange roof. And the existing I1C portion is about 1 hectare, and the remainder of the lot is zoned agricultural A1, represented by the light green color, which is about 5 hectares. So this is the concept plan for the property that was submitted with the application, and the applicant proposes to subdivide off the 1 hectare area of the property that's currently the I1C portion, amalgamate this with the area to the north, and the remaining 5 hectares is the main development application here, which would be a new industrial development subdivision, and they're showing 9 lots. They intend to service the lots with community water, private septic sewer, and they will provide a detailed stormwater management plan as they progress. And this is a rendering of the site, providing a bit more dimension to the concept, and generally showing the retaining walls as well that would be required. And this image is meant to convey what the owner's current concept is, and various other similar images were provided in the report. Additional supporting material was provided by the applicant and was attached to the report, traffic impact assessment, preliminary geotechnical report, and other design concepts. So this configuration of lots is not something that is secured through the proposed bylaws, and it's a separate subdivision application that actually has to be made in the future to go through all the technical details of subdivision. So these plans are considered conceptual only. So staff supports this application contingent on several conditions that would be required to be dealt with through this application process. First, changes to the list of permitted uses in the I1C zone is being recommended, and uses such as retail sales, office, and restaurants are not industrial uses and are best located in village or commercial zones. Draft bylaw amendments have been drafted to prevent the consumption of valuable industrial land by non-industrial uses. And also, just a comment on mini storage in particular, this use should be removed from the I1C zone, which is supported by Economic Development Cowichan and was recently suggested in the industrial land use strategy presented to the board.
Development Services staff have been in touch with Economic Development over this issue for various months, and the applicant has also been part of the industry panel that put together this strategy, and it's my understanding that the applicant does acknowledge the recommendation and was accepting of it, and despite that they had originally proposed mini storage on the lot. Secondly, back to the zone, but there's just a couple other recommended changes around agricultural setbacks and screening and landscaping. And moving on to the covenant, there's a recommendation that any future development be required to connect to a community water system, and putting in place a covenant would help secure this, as well as additional fire hydrants that would be required. So no new wells would be permitted on the property, and in terms of the hydrants, it would be due to the new road going through the property, and existing hydrants would not be feasible along Fisher Road. I also wanted to note that the Cobble Hill Improvement District is not currently issuing commercial or industrial connections, and that does create a complication for the applicant. And however, if they are successful with this application, that the development would still not proceed until such time as that is sorted out with the Improvement District, and that they're able to provide water connections. Staff is also recommending a permanent right-of-way to be registered for the existing CVRD groundwater monitoring well that is already located on the property. And lastly, a lot boundary adjustment should also occur as part of this application to clean up those lot lines and deal with what is sort of already happening on the property. The recommended resolution is that the OCP and rezoning amendment bylaws be forwarded to the board for consideration of first and second readings, that the covenants, right-of-way, and lot boundary adjustment be required prior to adoption of the bylaws, that a public hearing be scheduled, and that referrals be accepted. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, are there any questions for staff? Director Morrison.
Thank you. And Mr. Dennison is in the room. I would like to ask staff about the possibility and the availability of liquid waste treatment sewerage. Is it close by? Is it available? And I preface the question with the fact that in recent years, one of the number one issues that I've heard coming out of the community is aquifer protection. And so is there a spot? Is there availability? I think I know some distances. Perhaps Mr. Dennison, thank you.
Mr. Dennison, can you enlighten us?
I'll try to do that from what's resident in my brain here somewhere. First off, capacity-wise, lots of capacity. Well, shortly, as we do we're in the middle of our upgrade process. Now contractors have been retained and they're doing the work. We hope once the upgrades that are necessary for both ends of the system are all done and the system's integrated, we'll have some money to put in some more sewerage in the village area as well, so that people have a ready access. Longer term plans are to work down along Fairfield Road, and there's a right-of-way that further goes along, ultimately to connect in our Maple Hill system. So we managed to tie in another system, get rid of another little hard to manage little sewer service area. But down Fisher Road, we don't have any immediate plans. The existing piping would be in the village core area, so an extension would have to be built as part of this if we were going to tie them in. We certainly have the capacity for it. It's not an issue that way.
Thank you. Director Morrison, a follow-up.
Do you have any rough ideas how much 929 meters of sewer pipe would be?
The numbers change quite a bit. It would be several $100s a meter. It's probably $300, $400 a meter, depending. Some of it would have to be gravity sewer. There's a height of land in there, and then so we'd have to have some force main and some gravity sewer running down from there. Manholes, things like that. We could come up with an estimate if that was of interest to the committee.
Thank you. I have Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm glad you asked that question, Director Morrison. I think that that brings it to like $400,000 to connect that, and that could be a great addition to the community, connecting everyone along there, because as far as I can tell, Fisher Road is one of our worst areas for contamination of our aquifer. We're sitting around here trying to solve these issues, and something we can't even solve when it's too late. And then I'm looking at their OCP, and we're suggesting, and it says any business park, you know, essentially would have a sewer system. So this comes from the community. This is what they want. They want to protect themselves. I think it's a great spot for light industrial, like as far as the highway, it fits right there. It's, you know, I can't see it as it's perfect spot, but the one piece that is missing is the sewer. So I'd like to see that taken out of the application and adjusted.
Madam Chair, we'd have no difficulty accepting more sewer servicing.
Okay. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was involved with this original application when I was just a member of the APC, which goes back about 18 months or so. And I think it went to regional as well, or with areas A, B, and C to discuss. And everybody is more or less in agreement that, as Director Acton said, it's a great place for a light industrial park. The original intent, as was pointed out, was for the storage areas at the end of that, and that's been taken out by the staff in this as a permitted use because of the recent issued report by Economic Development. And I'm a little bit concerned here that we're applying a report which is only a week or two old to an application which has been in the pipeline for 18 months. And I would like, when I get the chance, to make an amendment to the permitted uses to include the use of part of that land for the original storage areas. And I'd seek your guidance on when I can do that.
I believe I heard the staff say that the applicant was had no problem with the storage being removed because he was part of the process of the industrial lands. So I don't know why you'd want to add it back in when it seems to me there was some consultation already.
There was, as far as I understand it, there's a two-part proponency to this particular application, and it's the other part of the other proponent, if I'm correct here, that was going to be putting the storage areas on there, and I'm sure Mr. McKinnon could speak to that.
Maybe does the applicant wish to add anything? Sure. Okay, welcome.
So, well, what I would say is that, yeah, it's not the hill I'm going to die on about this. I mean, we've been going around for 18 months, so, you know, if that's the case, the problem I have is that if we get into the circle of death here between this committee and the advisory area planning committee, we've already shown them this. Most of them thought it was a good idea to have this light, low impact industrial space at the back of the property where it butts along the agricultural and future residential. So it seemed like a good transition of having this 2-acre space that isn't going to be running an industrial operation, that's not going to have lights and working 2 shifts and all the rest that you may get into an industrial activity. So I didn't want to, now we've gone so far, we've shown all these pretty pictures, then we get this recommendation that says, okay, no, you're going to go there. We're not allowing the industrial or the mini storage. And we get in front of now we go to the public input, and I get the same people on the panel saying, well, we approve this with low impact at the back of the property. I just don't want to go this cycle of round and round and round we go.
You're in the wrong place.
Director Wilson?
Yeah, I understand that, and this is why I'm saying let's put that back in there, as long as we're not going to hold anything up, and give the local neighbours a bit of peace from some of the industrial activity that could go on there. But let's not hold this up. And as you say, this is not the hill you want to die on.
Like I said, I wasn't going to die on this, no. But I think it's, you know, I don't know. But you know what I think.
Yeah. Director Morrison, is this for staff, and you're next?
No, for the applicant, actually.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, I've been here long enough, been to enough meetings to know that people in Cobble Hill are really, really concerned about their aquifer. And, you know, I know that it's an additional cost to run pipe, and we just had an application earlier that's about running pipe between two communities. And you know, given the concerns that I've heard in the past around the exposure and the vulnerability of that aquifer, are you open to, or would you consider, given the scope of this application, running pipe and connecting to a proper treatment facility? Because at this point, I can't imagine going to the community saying, you know, we have this application, but guess what? We're going to septage to ground.
Okay, but you got to realize that most industrial uses, like what I'm proposing here, are, say, 15,000 square feet with 3 offices that are probably going to have 6 bathrooms that are going to use less than a single-family house. You're putting that into a sandy lot that this percolates perfectly there. There's nothing that percolates better than that area. So your usage, or what your load you're adding, is potentially about 9 houses. So the cost benefit, yeah, maybe I do the math and I say, okay, $500,000 doesn't make sense. So let's remove the application and we go agricultural. Chicken farm.
Director Morrison.
Well, and I guess that's exactly the point is, you know, we have to look at land use moving forward, and we don't know, and once the lots are sold, it's the permitted activities that will be allowed in these properties. And I keep hearing the #1 concern from residents and people in that community is the protection of that aquifer. And I see this as, you know, you say you don't want to die on that hill for the self-storage. This would be one of those hills that I would die on the behalf of people at Cobble Hill, because they're very concerned about their aquifer. So we go to a public hearing. What answer will you have for your community if this goes to a public hearing and they wonder why we are again allowing for exposure to the aquifer? You described it as a beautiful, sandy, great perking aquifer, and that's exactly how contaminants get into aquifers.
Madam Chair, can I point
Sure.
some things out? I did look at, discussed.
Could you go to the microphone a little bit, please?
Oh,
Thank
sorry.
You. Yeah.
Richard Buckles.
Yes.
We discussed in APC the possibility of extending the sewer, and there's a few problems there. First of all, it has to come through private lands where there's no right-of-ways from the existing sewer south of Fairfield Road. There's no access. Then it has to come all the way up Fisher Road, and the cost of it, when I'm looking at it and going, that's going to add probably about $60,000 or $70,000 for each of those lots. You know, and that with the cost of development these days, it's not going to pay off, right? And so one of the other point is that when we first looked at the design of each of these sites, and we tried to maximize them, because we're trying to get something to build something that's affordable or attainable by local businesses in small strata units, right? And once we develop to the maximum site coverage, and then we have the parking and the whatnot, we're probably going to end up having to put an engineered system in each of those sites in order to make it work. And what we've been doing with engineered systems these days is quite simple. It's an aggregate filter where the septic tanks they double the size of the septic tank, and then it's pumped through into an aggregate filter, and it comes out as crystal clear water, and we've been using it for irrigation. So we can solve 2 problems here, one with the reuse of water and one for the protection of the aquifer. So the quality of the effluent isn't there, and the uses that Alpine Pacific is proposing is more individual, wood-related manufacturing. It's not something that's going to generate a lot of contaminants, you know.
Director Acton, to the applicant or staff?
I think this is for staff.
Okay. Ms. Herrera. Oh, sure. Yep.
I was hiding.
Oh, he's still here too. Microphone, turn it on.
Oops, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Dennison. would this be treated just like a subdivision where the CVRD would be dictating what kind of sewer system and overseeing it and having to go to our specs kind of thing? Or is it just the applicant puts in whatever they want?
It's, Madam Chair, the rules would fall under Island Health. It's an on-site system, so we don't regulate that at all. The way that Island Health, the system for approval, it's not really approval. You have to have a certified designer of on-site systems, and they do the design and they sign it off to make sure it's done according to their requirements, and then that gets filed with Island Health. There's not a sort of a review and approval process. It's based on the expertise of the certified operator.
Follow up, Director Acton.
Okay, so how does it, how it works with a subdivision? Now we have better controls. Can we have any influence on it at all, or we can't because we're not taking over it? Because is it because we're not going to be? It's not becoming a system that we would be servicing. Okay.
Only so to be clear, Madam Chair, there's a unless you were working in this area, you wouldn't know, but below a certain quantity of sewage, it falls under Island Health jurisdiction, and we have nothing to do with that at all. Zero. Above that, when any kind of development that we're into Minister of Environment jurisdiction, then it falls under liquid waste management planning. Often our zoning kicks in where there's density bonusing that makes it, in order to get the density bonus, it has to be our system, that kind of thing affects that. But otherwise, that's only at the Minister of Environment level, Island Health level. We have nothing to do with it at all.
Okay. Director Wilson. Oh, Director Nicholson first, because she hasn't spoken yet. Director Nicholson.
Well, I was going to change the topic a little bit from sewage to safety. So if I recall, last term we had quite a lot of discussion about the school access across the road from this property.
It's quite a ways from this property, I think. Or does it?
I think, remember, there was a little...
Yes, I do.
And it is right across the road.
Oh, it is across the road from
so
the same... Okay, good point, Director.
So, Ms. Herrera, I was wondering, I thought I read somewhere about a pathway along there as an amenity, but maybe I couldn't find it when I went back to look. So, was that considered, or anything considered about improving that particular area?
In terms of pathways, I know Parks did look at an option for a trail along the southern boundary parcel line. Of course, that's on the opposite side of the school, but a connection through there, and that's the only trail that I'm aware of that was considered through this application, and Parks decided it wasn't a feasible location for a trail.
So,
Director Nicholson, a follow-up?
If I recall, there were children that rode their bicycles across the highway from the other side of the highway and came along that road, and it just seems to me that anything that would provide them with an off-road cycling, particularly through that corner area, might be helpful. So I would like that to be considered somehow.
Okay. Director Wilson.
Yeah, I can answer part of Director Nicholson's question. On the north end of that P2 area, there is a pathway to a gate that leads into the school. That pathway and that gate, it's only a man gate, was put in by the school as an escape for children who thought they were being bullied. And it's now morphed into an access path, which it's not meant to be, and that's why you get children crossing that road from parents who are dropping them off when they're supposed to be dropping them off somewhere else. That's the only thing. Now, all along that particular road, there are no parking signs. Those children are not supposed to be dropped off there, and nor are they supposed to be using the path that's been put in for the anti-bullying part of it. So it's something which could be looked at, of course, you know, organising the crossing there. But that's the only part that I know of. That's the only path that I know of down there.
I'd just like to insert, there was a lot of community discussion and a lot of people that would, that lived in Cobble Hill that would have to go, their children would have to go down the highway to access the school. So there was conversation for a couple of years. There was parking and dropping off, there still is, and it's highly used, and it's the only other exit out of Cobble Hill. And that was something that we heard from all of our areas that are connected to that school. And Director Nicholson.
Yeah, so it sounds like it hasn't really been considered with this application, and so I guess I would refer it back to staff to maybe.
Well, we do have some staff. I have Mr. Farquhar, who's been also engaged with us on that exact application, and maybe he could add some light to this. Mr. Farquhar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Ms. O'Hara said, the Parks Division, along with the local Cobble Hill Advisory Parks Commission, looked at this particular application and whether there was opportunities for a pathway. And as was indicated, the outcome of that assessment was that it wasn't favorable in terms of where this particular property is located relative in the community as it relates to the adopted Cobble Hill Community Parks Master Plan. The challenge with this property as it relates to access to the school is it's on the other side of Cobble Hill Road, and there would be no opportunity with respect to this application to improve accessibility from the east side of the highway to the school, as was noted earlier about some children riding their bikes to the school. We do have a totally separate initiative with the Ministry of Transportation, which directors are aware of, in terms of the Roadside Pathways Initiative. That we're hopefully going to see that shed some light in terms of what capacity we have within our local roadways to make improvements for active transportation. But that would be separate from this application.
Thank you, Mr. Farquhar. Director Nicholson, do you have a follow-up?
Well, it strikes me that this is an opportunity, and I don't understand why we couldn't consider it as part of this.
I think they're saying there are opportunities that they're working on with the ministry.
Well, we all know that the ministry issue is quite a ways off at this point. So it just seems to me that this was a safety thing, and that some discussion and thought might. Because if I recall, when we were dealing with that issue, there was, I think we were at odds with the Parks Commission in some of the discussion about safety, and it was that the school hadn't been included as well. And I'm just trying to remember now, but it was a complicated, and there was a lot of community interest in having access for kids. And while I see that it is across the other side of the road, I do remember there were kids that rode their bicycles, which if you were coming from the highway, you would be on that side of the road. So,
Mr. Farquhar maybe can help us out again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the other key challenges in this area is if one were on the north side of Cobble Hill Road, given the curvature of the road, sight lines, and traffic, and the types of vehicles, aka industrial traffic, having an appropriate sight line to facilitate a crosswalk would be very challenging, and the Ministry of Transportation was not in favor of any sort of crossing in this location, in its proximity to the school. So again, we're looking at a property that's on the other side from the school, and certainly the issues of access and improving access for children to the school is definitely something of mind to always look to find ways to improve. But in terms of the assessment work done to date by staff with the ministry, it's a separate issue from this particular property.
Thank you, Mr. Farquhar. Moving to Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure that I expected this to go on for quite into all these other things. But getting back to my original subject of trying to add this permitted use of the storage areas back into the permitted uses area, I would like to move that that section C1 permitted uses for South Cowichan zoning amendment bylaw 4276 be amended by adding self-storage as a permitted use.
Okay. Yes.
So we're only talking about zoning right now, not the OCP amendment. Okay. I'm good with that.
Okay. So,
because I'd like to vote separately on the OCP amendment part of it. I'd like to not, I would like it to not exclude sewer. Can we do that?
okay, Mr. Tippett. Okay. Okay. Oh, here we go. You have Mr. Batstone. Okay, great. Thank you. Director Acton?
I'd like to refer it back to staff and have that referred back and presented as an option with the sewer attached. I don't feel comfortable putting strain on the aquifer where we are funding, we're trying to protect this aquifer at the moment.
Okay, well, let's just hear from your first question. We'll get your first question and then we'll.
Madam Chair, thank you, and thanks to Keith for having the information handy. So in the I1C zone, and I recognize that this would be a variation on the I1C zone that's proposed, but the I1C zone has a variable minimum parcel size dependent on level of service available to the parcel. So if there are no municipal services whatsoever, community water or community sewer, the minimum lot size for subdivision is 2 hectares. If you have community water service only, it's 0.4 hectares, and if you have both community sewer and community water, it's 0.2 hectares. So right now, this applies throughout the Cobble Hill industrial area at Fisher Road. So I just wanted to point out that this is not something that's unique to this site. If there's concern about making anybody who wants to develop industrial land in Cobble Hill not use ground disposal anymore, this zone would have to be changed as well, which is a much bigger scope than this particular application. So just for the information of the committee. So if we were to follow the pattern that exists today, we would implement similar provisions, and I believe, is that correct, Ms. Herrera? You've put in similar provisions for lot size in your draft zone?
Okay, so no, there's no change to the requirements for minimum lot sizes. What is proposed is through a covenant requirement that basically says they must connect to community water. And that requirement, if it's in the covenant, would be put in place regardless of lot size. So that covenant's registered on title and basically is overriding what the zone is saying in terms of water service.
Okay, Madam Chair, so it sounds like what Ms. Herrera is saying is that the proposal is the existing standard that applies to I1C plus a covenant, so it's actually stronger than the wording in the I1C zone in respect of community water, but it would not require community sewer connection, nor does any industrial zone in Cobble Hill require community sewer connection at this time. I hope that helps.
Okay. Ms. Herrera.
And you could put it in through adding it to the covenant, for clarification.
Does that become a green banana right now? I'm happy to defer it, or so we're. But I would like to see it in there because this is an opportunity for us to improve on things and stop further contamination in an area where they are really concerned. I think we owe it to the community to do that.
Oops. Oh, did you? No, I think you had it on. Director Salmon.
Don't we have a motion on the floor from Director Wilson about the storage?
It was not seconded.
It was. I seconded it.
Oh, you seconded it.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the motion on the floor, is to add back the storage. Okay. So is there any more? Director Morrison.
So just so I'm understanding the context, there's some hesitation to follow staff's recommendation to not include it because we've just commissioned the Economic Development Division to study our industrial land base and availability, and it's indicating that we don't include self-storage on these types of lands, but this resolution is going counter to that.
Correct.
Okay.
That's my understanding. Okay, Director Salmon.
And just to clarify that, as Director Wilson said, and I was on the APC site visit too, that was a consensus due to transition with the potential residential development that it would be better to have something quieter like self-storage in that particular end of it, I believe.
Director Acton.
So now I just have a question for staff. Can we actually, we can't influence what people are going to do on the property to that extent and say, okay, well, that back half should be this, just in case there's a subdivision. Is that...
Ms. Herrera, can we indicate exactly where the storage can go?
You could restrict it through covenant on a plan showing where that use would be permitted. If it is added back into the zone, it's an use allowed on any zone that has that zoning.
Okay. Director Wilson.
I thought this was going to be fairly simple, but obviously not. Let me answer or address what Director Morrison just said about the new economic report. And I'm going to repeat what I've just said earlier on. We're trying to get the planning backlog cleared. Here's an application which has been in the pipeline for 18 months. And a new report comes across and says, can't really do that. So you're going to now, again, retroactively apply that report to something which has been going on for a long time and looks like it's going to go on for a lot longer. Where would that end? If I have another report next week, are you going to apply that to everything that's in the pipeline now? I don't think so. I just don't see the logic.
Director Kuhn, and I'm going to be calling, can I actually you go ahead, Director Kuhn, and I'm going to call a 5-minute recess after you've spoken.
Madam Chair, we're going through a similar process again like we do now and then, where we get lost in nitpicking little things. There's an application on the floor, and I think we should deal with it, and we should stay away from some of adjusting this, adjusting that, and looking for this. Let's make it straightforward. These are minor little things that we're dealing with, and they're holding up everything, and they're costing us time, and we get aggravated over it, and we don't agree on anything, and yet it's not major issues. We always get lost in these little issues, and then we nitpick, and I'm sick and tired of it, quite frankly.
Well, thank you for your input, Director Kuhn, and I'm going to be calling a 5-minute recess, and we'll come back to that. Thank you.
Welcome back. Welcome back, Director Marcotte. I think we have a motion on the floor. So could we read that motion so we know what we're all talking about?
Madam Chair, I'll do my best. My understanding it was a variation on the staff recommendation that substituted or added self-storage back to the list of permitted uses in the zoning. That's my understanding.
Okay, so on that motion, Director Acton.
I would like to actually defer it and speak to it and add, there's a few things I'd like to see in it. And just pushing applications for the sake that they've taken a long time is not good in my books. I've seen in my community decisions made at this table really come to the taxpayers and really hurt the community 8 years down the road kind of thing is usually the thing. So I'm not willing to just make quick decisions around here that are really important. And in this, what I'd like to see coming back is add Director Wilson's zoning if he feels that's important. And I would also like to see a covenant for the sewer or a solution, a better solution for sewer connection. It's a function of South Cowichan where we're all paying into, and a good chunk of it right now is trying to help protect that aquifer. So that is unacceptable in my books. And number 3, I was here for that trail behind the school. It's very problematic for that school. I've had 2 kids go there. And I'm curious if it was considered, if we're talking about behind this industrial area, we're going to have some housing. Now, how do those kids get to that school? So has there been discussion that there might be a trail from the back of the property that goes along it so that you can get to Fisher Road and to the school? The fact that we're trying to stop kids to go through there is absolutely ridiculous. It's one cranky guy who ran it, and the school wants that open. And while my kids were at that school, we had a gas leak. We had that huge windstorm of whatever year it was. You couldn't get through. It's their secondary access. It's really important, and it gives kids access to the school, which would add a kilometer to their walk. It's ridiculous to not try and help the kids get to school safely there. And I'd like to see those 3 things addressed.
So you're making a referral motion back to...
Referral motion, if someone would second it, and I'd like those 3 things addressed.
So the 3 things were all start with S: sewer, safety, trail, and storage.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? I have a seconder. Any discussion on the referral motion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That motion passes. Referred to staff. So the next item is R6, fireworks. Nino. Mr. Morano.
Madam Chair, we have a request for a fireworks display at Brentwood College, located at 2735 Baker Road in Area A. It's the annual regatta that they have there. We had a similar application last year. We had, as a result of that event, we had no complaints forwarded to our department. The fireworks bylaw requires board approval for fireworks that are not for all days except for January 1st, July 1st, and October 31st. This one is planned for April 26, 2019. So we'll require board approval.
Thank you. Do I have questions? Director Salmon.
Sorry, not a question. I'm getting ready to move it unless other people have questions. Yes, I'd like to move the recommendation.
Second. Could I ask a question? If no one else has questions?
Sure.
Where do they hold it? Hold it in the field?
There is a dock or barge type structure that's going to be floating on the water.
So it's out on the water. And what time of day is it?
It's it starts at 8 p.m. And it's probably going to be about half an hour long.
Okay, so I was instructed to relay to Director Yanni DiNardo's concern for spring songbirds and wildlife in general, the disruption that fireworks have against them. So I've done that. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. R7, Mr. Morano, Handy Road.
Madam Chair, we have a application for a permanent change to a liquor license at Bridgman's Bistro located at 740 Handy Road. This permanent change will not increase occupant load in any way. It's an entertainment endorsement application where things such as paint nights and more interactive activities included with the liquor license. We have an opportunity to either opt in or opt out of comment on this application for the liquor and cannabis licensing branch.
Thank you. Questions? And the recommendation? Am I supposed to ask you to read it now? Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that the liquor and cannabis licensing branch be advised that the CVRD does not wish to provide comments or recommendations with regard to the application for a permanent change entertainment endorsement by the Bridgman's Bistro located at 740 Handy Road, Mill Bay, Area A, and the liquor license is number 305354.
All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? No. Carried. So R8, Mr. Morano.
Madam Chair, we have another liquor license application. This time it's a temporary change for Vignetti Zanata Limited Winery located at 5039 Marshall Road. The application is to do with 5 proposed events that they plan on having, which is under the Agricultural Land Commission, which is allows less than or up to 10 events, and with not a maximum of 150 attendees, which they're under on both counts. The dates are June 1st, July 20th, August 24th, August 2nd, and September 22nd of this year. And we are in a position where we can object or not object to this application.
Any questions? Would you like to read the recommendation, Mr. Tippett?
Yes, Madam Chair. The recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that the liquor and cannabis licensing branch be advised that the Cowichan Valley Regional District has no objection to the proposed temporary changes for the events taking place in 2019 on June 1st, July 20th, August 24th, August 2nd, and September 21st. At Vignetti Zanata Limited Winery located at 5039 Marshall Road, Glenora, Area E, and the liquor license number is 171424.
All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, carried. R9, Mr. Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is regarding the Elk Ridge, proposed Elk Ridge development, in which we have a first stage approval for taking over the sewer and water utilities with a number of details there. Madam Chair, we brought this as a recommendation to proceed to create the service areas, which we would do. However, we've just learned today from planning staff that there's a meeting on this development coming up on Tuesday, in which there's some question about whether it's going to proceed at all. The owners, the developers have some issues that they want to bring forward, and there's some question about that. So we'd rather not create the service areas and have them exist for no purpose, only to have to withdraw them later on, which we've actually had happen before. For example, at Marble Bay, we had service areas existing for years. So what we'd actually like to suggest to the committee is this be referred to the next meeting. And that will give time for this other meeting to have occurred, and then we can bring the information from that meeting forward if it's appropriate.
Okay. Director Morrison.
Well, I'm going to be even a little more vague and say that this be referred to a, not the next meeting, but to an upcoming meeting after this meeting has occurred.
Any questions or comments? All in favor of the referral motion? Opposed? Carried. Okay, R10. Is that you?
It is again, yes. Thank you,
Okay.
Madam Chair. So the CVRDs received a development permit application for 1821 Wilmot Road in Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay, for a 15-unit building strata. Under the development, will be required to be provided with sewer servicing and drainage servicing. It's already in the sewer service area. We're working out the details of how that's going to come about. However, on the drainage side, there will be need to integrate into the surrounding drainage service area. We have one there in Cowichan Bay. We don't have very many places, but we do there in Cowichan Bay. And so we need to incorporate them into the sewer service area so that they can pay their way and that all these integration requirements can be carried out. Likely they plan to make use of the existing infrastructure in the Cowichan Bay Estates development, but we have to make sure that that's all properly designed and the engineering's all done correctly. So, but at this point, we're recommending that it be incorporated in the drainage service area.
Questions? Director Acton?
Move the recommendation, please.
Yep. Second. Any questions or comments? So all in favor? Opposed? No. Carried.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Been an interesting visit.
R8? Mr. Tippett, please clarify R8.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You may have noticed when I was reading out the recommendation, I hesitated because when we were talking about the dates for Zaneta's special endorsement, I mentioned June 1st, July 20th, August 24th, then August 2nd. Mr. Morano advises me that there was a typographical error, and actually it should be August 25th, followed by September 21st. So it is August 25th, not August 2nd, for the record. Sorry for the error.
Thank you for catching that.
Wow, good one.
All right, so any unfinished business? Mr. Tippett.
Sorry, Madam Chair, no, there's no unfinished business at the
How
moment.
about new business?
None that
How
I am
about
aware
question
of.
period?
That could happen.
Okay.
Madam Chair, could I just have clarification on R2, what your resolution there was, please? That was the APC referrals and procedures bylaw?
Yeah, Mr. Tippett, could you read those two resolutions?
Because I believe you divided them.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I can't actually read the resolution because I didn't record it as such, but the gist of it is that the fee component of Ms. Garnett's report will proceed as an amendment bylaw to the Fees and Procedures Development Application bylaw.
With a minor change.
With a minor change as recommended by our board chair, and then we're going to separate out the other issue of procedures, and that will be dealt with in a future bylaw and a future report to this committee.
Thank you. And if I may, just in regards to the notification distance, the CVRD's notification seems to be out of step with a lot of other jurisdictions. And just maybe for a point of information for you, North Cowichan has just redone theirs, so their whole process. But I would like an opportunity to make a presentation at some time to the committee on recommendations for how you could improve your public engagement and notifications. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Alrighty. Could I have a motion to go into closed session? Okay, all in favor? 5 minutes.